Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted that you're here. I was recently traveling in the highlands of New Guinea, and I ran into a man who had 3 wives. And so I asked him how many wives he would like to have. And there was this long pause, and I thought, is he going to say 5? Is he going to say 10? Is he going to say 25? And he leaned towards me and he said, none. In fact, we're a pair bonding animal. 86% of world cultures permit a man to have several wives, but you have to have a lot of cows or a lot of goats or a lot of chickens or a lot of education or a lot of money in order to do it, to build a harem. We are basically a pair bonding species. It's a hallmark of the human animal. We're also adulterous, of course. I've looked at adultery in 40 societies. I found it in every single one. But actually, that's not the news. People are always interested in adultery and why we are adulterous, but all kinds of animals are adulterous, are very promiscuous. What the hallmark of the human animal is not that we are adulterous, but that we bother to pair up at all. And indeed, we do. We do it with tremendous regularity. As a matter of fact, Samuel Johnson once said, talking about remarriage, he called it the triumph of hope over experience. And indeed, we do just that. So everybody in this room, everybody in this festival, everybody in this world is coming basically from the same pair bonding people that were around 4.4 million years ago. We really are cousins. So just starting with that, I really want to talk today about the evolution of romantic love and feelings of deep attachment and on into the future of the family. And actually, I'm rather positive about it. I put people in brain scanners who are madly in love. I and my colleagues have put 17 people who were just fallen happily in love, 15 people who had just been rejected in love, and 17 people who are in love long term. And from that, I've come to realize a great deal about really what love is. And here's our scanner. It's, you know, you really can't get 2 people into a scanner. That was a cartoon by in the New Yorker some time ago. But this is the machine that we use. And I think that we've evolved 3 distinctly different brain systems for mating and reproduction. One is the sex drive, craving for sexual gratification. Second is romantic love, obsessive love, passionate love, being in love, infatuation. George Bernard Shaw once, he said, love consists of overestimating the differences between one woman and another. And indeed, we do. And the third of the 3 brain systems is attachment. And they operate in all kinds of ways to create all the nuances that we have when we feel different forms of romantic love. But they come deep out of the brain. This is one of our brain scans. You can see the cortex where we do our thinking. The limbic system is where we have a lot of our emotions. And way below that is where romantic love lies in the brain. It's a survival mechanism. It lies right next to brain regions for thirst and hunger. We've needed it to survive. This is where the sex drive lies in the hypothalamus, very near the ventral tegmental area, which pumps out dopamine and gives you that focus and the craving and the obsession of intense romantic love. Attachment, the third of those 3 brain systems, is up here. Once again, way below our thinking processes in the mind and way below our emotions. We have a lot of emotions. In fact, I always felt that romantic love was an emotion, or at least a swinging from emotions, from high to low, a whole host of emotions. And it is, of course, it has lots of emotions. It's got a lot of cognitive thinking processes, but basically it's a drive. It comes from the most primitive parts of the brain linked with drive. As a matter of fact, I think that these 3 brain systems work together. I think the sex drive gets you out there looking for a whole range of partners. You know, you can have sex with somebody and not be in love with them. I think romantic love evolved to enable you to focus your mating energy on just one person at a time. And I think attachment, that 3rd brain system, evolved so that you can tolerate this person, or at least stick with them long enough to raise a child through infancy. So these are the 3 brain systems. They evolved a long time ago. We think that they were beginning to evolve when mankind came down from the trees 4.4 million years ago, and thus we are all part of this same family. As we are today. In fact, around the world, people sing for love, they dance for love, they compose songs, poems, ballets, operas, movies, plays, they build temples, they build castles, they paint paintings, they do sculptures, they have myths and legends about love. We have love charms, love magic, love potions. People pine for love, they live for love, they kill for love, and they die for love. It's one of the most powerful brain systems, much more powerful than the sex drive. You know, if you're casually having sex with somebody, you really don't care if they're having sex with somebody else. But when you're in love, you care. It's one of the most powerful brain systems that has ever evolved. As a matter of fact, the ancient Greeks called it madness from the gods, and that's what it is. In fact, I often walk through the Museum of Natural History in those halls, and I look at all of the little amulets and charms and little figures and rings and bracelets and earrings, et cetera. And I think about all the love affairs that occurred before you and me. I was estimating a couple nights ago how many love affairs made every single person in this room. And I estimated about 133,000 very good love affairs created the next generation and the next generation, passing on these brain systems to you and me. So, let's see, what have I got here? What makes a happy partnership? You know, all kinds of people talk about how we preserve love. There's all kinds of articles about, you know, don't fight, don't threaten divorce, listen carefully. Your childhood creates certain kinds of approaches to how you deal in a relationship, and that's all perfectly fine. But it's psychology. And I'm an anthropologist who studies the brain. And there's some things in the brain that show exactly what is happening when you're madly in love and in a deep relationship with somebody. So I'm not trying to get rid of the psychology. I'm trying to add what the brain tells us about a happy partnership. And we stumbled on this research. It came from our study of people who are in love long term, and also from people in China who are in love long term. And as it turns out, there's 3 parts of the brain that become activated when you are in a deep, loving partnership. And they are empathy, the mirror neurons linked with feelings of empathy, controlling your own emotions. It's the only person on the planet that you can control. And the last thing is positive illusions. Whoops. Positive illusions is a very interesting one. You got to overlook what you don't like about this person and focus on what you do. And one particular example in my personal life was a man who I used to go out with who was extremely slow. Oh, he was so slow. I tell you, I was walk when he would be behind me almost. He talked slowly, he thought slowly, he moved slowly, he drove me insane. But when we went to a museum, he could look at a painting very carefully, and then all through the dinner hour talking about what this meant and that meant, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to get rid of what you don't like about this person and then focus on what you do. And it's a rather large part of the brain that is activated. These are the 3 things that the brain tells us about a happy partnership. So you got to find the right person, though. You got to pick the right person. And so, in fact, my odyssey into this started in 2005 when Match.com came to me, 2 days before Christmas, actually, and wanted to meet 2 days after Christmas. I live in New York City, and nothing happens at Christmas time, but I met with them, and as it turns out, it was the CEO on down from Match. And in the middle of the morning, somebody said to me, "Why do you fall in love with one person rather than another?" And with all of my brain scanning studies over a matter of many years, it was never as hard as trying to answer this question. And of course, there's all kinds of, this is my title of my most recent book about this, Why Him, Why Her? Something I've spent, a good 15 years trying to figure out. Why are you chemically drawn to some people rather than others? Now, there's all kinds of social things that happen. I mean, we tend to fall in love with somebody from, timing is important, proximity is important. I would even say at my age, lighting is important. We tend to fall in love with somebody from the same socioeconomic background, same general level of intelligence, same level of good looks, same religious and social values. Your childhood always plays a role. But you know, you can walk into a room where everybody is from your background. They all have the same level of intelligence, and you don't fall in love with all of them. So I began to think to myself, maybe basic body chemistry can naturally pull you towards some people rather than others. And you know, people will say, well, we have chemistry, or we didn't have chemistry. And I wanted to know what that meant. So I began to look through all of the basic biological literature, looking for any trait at all in the brain linked with any biological system. Now, there's all kinds of systems in the brain, but most of them keep the eyes blinking or the heart beating. They're not linked with personality traits. And these 4 basic brain systems, each one of them, as it turns out, is linked with a constellation of personality traits. So I decided what I would do is create a questionnaire to see to what degree you express the traits in each one of these brain systems, and then watch on Match.com and its sister site, Chemistry.com, who's naturally drawn to whom. That questionnaire now has been taken by 14 million people in 40 countries. The business community is now using it, et cetera. But I'm going to race through some of the basic traits of these 4 broad biological styles of thinking. Don't leave this room thinking that you're only one style. We're all a combination of it. These aren't cubbyholes. They're brain systems, and we all express all of them. The issue is to what degree. So I'm just going to go through them. People who are very expressive of the dopamine system I call explorers. They're born free. The academic term for them is they're sensation-seeking, they're novelty-seeking, they're risk-taking. They're more curious than most people. Curiosity is in the dopamine system. And in fact, they make more money, they lose more money, they're more likely to go to college, et cetera. It's not just physical exploration, it's mental. People who go to the opera, go to the theater, read widely, travel a great deal, are also going to be very expressive of the dopamine system. Enthusiastic, optimistic. I wouldn't even be surprised if Obama is this type. You know, right after he won the election the first time, the following day in the humor paper Onion, it led with "Black man given worst job in the world," and indeed he was optimistic about it, and I think he is actually still a very optimistic person because, at least in part, because of dopamine, not obviously because of world affairs. They're independent, self-reliant, tend to be impulsive, spontaneously generous, mentally flexible, very open-minded, and idea generation. These people are very good at basic creativity. As a matter of fact, if you give a Parkinson's patient L-Dopa, which is boosting up the dopamine system, that person will become more creative. Either a better painter or a better at drawing or better at poetry, et cetera. They become more creative. Richard Branson is a good example. I've always thought rules were made to be broken. Lang Lang, the concert pianist, flair, dazzling, charisma, bravado, extremes, daredevil, ebullient. And I think Gloria Steinem also. And these people are drawn to people like themselves. The energetic, curious, creative, spontaneous kind of person is drawn to people like themselves. The second people are a group of people expressive of the serotonin system. They follow the rules, social norm conformity. They like the familiar. They'll go to the same bar every Friday night instead of a different one. They're cautious. They're not scared. It's called harm avoidant. They're calm, they're self-controlled, and they're modest. As a matter of fact, on Match.com, I try to tell these people to be a little less modest, you know. I mean, you know, courtship is not about honesty. Courtship is about winning. And, you know, no good peacock makes its feathers look smaller. And indeed, you know, these people have got to brag. I mean, you know, men are good at bragging. And women don't do it too well because it's so transparent. But we're listening. We're listening when you're bragging and trying to figure out what you're doing. They tend to follow plans, schedules, orderly, sustained attention. They can do the same thing over and over again. I remember one time I tried to get a job. I was very young. I'd taken the bus to San Francisco, and I tried to get a job in a pea factory, you know, just canning peas. And they wouldn't let me, they didn't want me. They need a different personality style. I was going to have my arm in one of those pea things, I'm sure. Literal, concrete, very good with numbers. Importance of belonging, respecting authority, follow those. Religiosity is in the serotonin system. This is why if you take ecstasy or acid or something, you can have a religious experience. You're driving up the serotonin system and can trigger some of this biology for religiosity. Loyalty is a really interesting one. The questionnaire has 56 questions on it, 14 for each of these types. And there's one question, and mathematically it comes out the same over and over and over again. This particular type, the question is something like, do you want loyal friends or interesting friends? Well, we all want loyal friends, and we all want interesting friends, but this type cannot tolerate unloyal friends. They can't tolerate. And whereas the other three types cannot tolerate uninteresting friends. It's a real mathematical divide and part of this serotonin system in the brain. Meg Whitman is a perfect example. I mean, you know, values, holy smoke. That word values, I'm into reading biographies of, I'm going to have to read 10 of them for all of the Republicans that are now going to be in the field, but I got a big book about Hillary. But anyway, the bottom line is, I mean, what is eBay but, you know, details? You know, you're moving rubber bands from Mississippi to Alabama, for God's sakes. I mean, this is a company that is just devoted to the details. I'm not surprised that she did a very good job at this. Mitt Romney is a perfect example, religious guy. He also shows quite a few activity of the testosterone system, the very heavy brow ridges, the high forehead, the high cheekbones, and the very square jaw is all built by testosterone. But so he would be a person who's very expressive of the serotonin system and also the testosterone system. Hu Jintao, former president of China, once again orderly, frugal, cautious, consensus building, reserved, and modest. And once again, these people are drawn to people like themselves. In this case, similarity attracts. Just the way with the high dopamine, curious, energetic type goes for people like themselves. The traditional, cautious, conventional type also goes for people like themselves. The third is the high testosterone type. They're analytical, logical, experimental, exacting, rank-oriented, dominance matching. They will attack you, and they expect you to attack back. And in fact, I once had a bizarre evening. It was a black tie dinner in New York City, and I was standing there with 4 journalists, and one of them was a guy from the Wall Street Journal. And he was taking me to the cleaners, I mean, to the cleaners. And so I was basically getting smaller and smaller. You know, there's 2 basic postural messages in the animal community, looking little and looking big. So I was getting worse and worse. And all of a sudden, I turned around to this guy, something snapped in my head, and I said something to him that was vicious. And I don't remember what it was, but it was also funny. And as a result, all 5 of us went like this. It's called the barred tooth display. Chimpanzees do it too. It's under extreme stress, you do that. Anyway, I thought to myself, oh, if he acts like a woman, he'll never forgive me. If he acts like a man, he may respect me. And indeed, the moment came, he put his hands and said, Helen, he started to laugh. That allowed all the others to laugh. And he's been pleasant to me ever since. So, you know, I often talk to business audience, and, you know, it's hard to attack the boss. But the bottom line is certain kinds of bosses are going to like you better for it. But you got to pick your moment, that's for sure. Emotionally contained, they are contained. In fact, I have a girlfriend who once said to her husband recently, she said to him, sweetie, you haven't told me that you loved me in a month. And he said, well, I said that last month and nothing's changed. This is very, very emotionally connected. Decisive, bold, and get to the point. These are the ones that scream, get to the point. Margaret Thatcher is a good example. Steve Jobs is a standard example. Hillary Clinton, I think, is very high on the testosterone system, and Bill Gates. Well, I'm not going to explain that. This is going to take too long. Anyway, the bottom line is these people go for their opposite. The high testosterone goes for the high estrogen, and the high estrogen goes for the high testosterone. And a perfect example is, well, Hillary and Bill, but we'll see. I call them negotiators. They see the big picture. It's actually the way the brain is built. There's many more connections in the female brain than average female brain, connecting the 2 sides of the brain. There's also more connections from front to back in the brain, et cetera. So they have a holistic, contextual, long-term view, more mentally flexible, imaginative, really good executive social skills, reading posture, gesture, tone of voice. Theory of mind, it's intuition. We now know the biology of intuition. It's not a secret. It's not magic. A Nobel Prize has been given, actually, for that. And what's most interesting, they're empathetic, nurturing, and they're trusting. Anthropologists haven't known how trusting could have evolved. Because you trust the wrong person, you're screwed. You trust the right person, and you save actually a lot of metabolic energy. But what I find so interesting about this is the kind of person who's going to be trusting is also going to be good at reading faces, postures, gestures, tone of voice. They're getting into somebody's head, being imaginative about it, and seeing it in the larger picture. So you can begin to see how a constellation of personality traits will evolve together. And they're introspective. Everything means something. Just the way he cuts that lemon means there's no sex tonight. You know, everything means something. They're agreeable. They don't hit you in the face, but they stab you in the back. Women aren't any nicer than men. They just do it differently. Emotionally expressive and what I call diplomatic intelligence. Oprah's a good example. Bill Clinton. The whole world knows he can't stop talking. He's just never stops talking. He's really emotionally expressive. He's the one that cried at the daughter's wedding. His book's about 963 pages long. Can't stop writing either. It's a real synthesizing mind. You know, we've been wondering for a long time when we're going to have our first female president. I think we've had our first female president, Clinton, and of course Charles Darwin, who has connected every living thing. So I did this questionnaire is the first, to my knowledge, the first in the world to start from brain biology, to make a questionnaire, and then go back to brain biology to prove it, to validate it. And this is some of the data. I won't go into it. But anyway, I did start a new company. It's going to launch in the next couple of weeks, in which we're going to bring a lot of this data to the business world. Deloitte's already using it, a version of it, to train 100,000 of their employees on how to understand their clients, actually. But I want to start with, before I talk a little bit about the future, I want to tell you a story. I was in Japan with Match.com, and we had begun to start Match.com in Japan. So I was supposed to go, I was supposed to talk to the journalists, and finally the last night came. So I said to my little handler, a wonderful friend of mine, I said, well, what am I doing tonight? She said, well, you know, we're going to have a little mixer. And the first 300 people who sign up are going to come to this mixer. Everybody's going to take your personality questionnaire, and they're going to put on their wrist a rubber band of a certain color. So if they're highest on the testosterone scale, we'll give them what I call a red, power tie red. And if they are high estrogen, particularly high estrogen, they're going to wear a little band that what I call tree hugger green. And then if you're very high on the dopamine system, a sort of an electric yellow, and the royal blue for the high, the builder for the high serotonin type. So anyway, I said, well, okay, so what am I supposed to do? And she said, well, you're going to explain to the audience what these four broad styles of thinking and behaving are. And then we are going to have a little icebreaker. I said, oh, so what's that? And she said, well, we're going to roll out 4 bottom layers of a wedding cake, about 2 feet by 2 feet, and a whole lot of decorations. And each of the 4 are going to go to different parts of this huge ballroom. I mean, an enormous ballroom with vast flowers and mannequins with wedding dresses and 100 people from the press, et cetera. And I, Helen Fisher, am going to have to rate these cakes. I said, oh my God, this is the nadir of my academic career. So anyway, so the first cake that I went off to see was the cake that was done by the high estrogen type. And this is what I found. That cake was smiling at me. It was saying, please connect. Let's be friends. It's full of emotion and connection. So I said, oh, wow, okay, 1 for 1. So then I went over to the cake built by the high serotonin, the traditional types. And the crowd parted, and I walked in, and sure enough, this is what I saw. It's formal. It's probably who you want to do your cake. It doesn't have the emotion, it doesn't have the connection, but it's a formal wedding cake. 1 kiwi, 1 cherry, 1 kiwi, 1 cherry, 1 kiwi, 1 cherry. It's an orderly cake. So then I go over to the high testosterone cake, and the crowd parts, and I walk in over them, and I take a look at the cake, and this is what I see. There is no emotion in that cake. There is no emotion anything about that cake. But they've decorated around the cake. They've thought outside the box. They're experimental. So then I go to the last cake, the high dopamine cake. These are the, the risk-taking, novelty-seeking kind of people. And the crowd parts. And the first thing I see is 3 men pitching fruit at the cake. And then one of the guys looks up at me, he sees me coming, and there's a vase full of flowers right next to the cake, not decoration. He takes one look at me, picks the flowers out of the thing, dripping wet, and plunges them into the middle of the cake. And here we got the cake. So the bottom line is, I don't believe in the golden rule to treat others as you want to be treated. I think we have to go with the platinum rule, treat others as they want to be treated. Figure out who they are, and you can reach into their mind and please. So a little bit about the future, and then I'll be out. So I do a national study with Match.com every year called Singles in America. We don't poll the Match population, we poll the American population. So it's based on the US Census. We got the right number of blacks, whites, Asian, Latino, gay, straight, rural, suburban, urban, every part of the country, from age 21 to 71 plus. And we find a lot of things every single year. But most interesting to me, here's our group of people. 54% of Americans do believe in first sight. Almost 50% have had the experience of love at first sight. They want to make it easier to marry, singles do. 89% believe you can stay married to the same person forever. This one is really fascinating to me. 51% have imagined a future together on the first date. This is Americans, this is not people on Match.com. And 33% believe it's okay to leave a satisfactory marriage if you are no longer in love. That is amazing. Even a generation ago, people would not walk out of a satisfactory marriage if they weren't madly in love. Yeah?
Can you give us your thoughts on these stats?
Yeah, I'm on my way. And of course, by age 49, a lot of people are going to be married. But here's the key. There's a study, a fascinating study, that showed that 67% of people who are now living together are terrified of divorce for very obvious reasons. They're terrified of it. And so what they're doing, and this is a hypothesis, a new hypothesis of mine, is what is happening is we have an emerging pre-commitment stages of romance. They're so scared of divorce for logical reasons that they want to know everything about this person before they tie the knot. And I think that our one-night stands, you can learn a lot about a human being between the sheets. It's a great way to begin to get to know. I'm not suggesting it, I'm just saying that it's an effective way of learning a good deal about a human being. And of course, you don't race into down the aisle after that, then you might try some friends with benefits, a lot of people do, and then people will live together before they marry. And in fact, in the past, marriage used to be the beginning of a relationship. Now I think it's the finale. In fact, I think Americans seem to think that all of these one-night stands and friends with benefits and everything is just reckless. I think it's cautious. I think it's caution in a time in human evolution when marriages tend to be very unstable for all kinds of reasons, and you really want to know that person before you tie the knot. Prenups, 36%. I'm rather surprised that there are so few people who want a prenup. As an anthropologist in a hunting and gathering societies, nobody discusses who's going to live with the children, or the children are part of a clan. It's a biological thing. You're not going to discuss who owns his bow and arrow and her digging stick, etc. I actually think it's quite a natural human response to have a prenup before you marry. And we're seeing a change in marriage. A lot of people are saying marriage is dead. Marriage isn't dead. Marriage is changing. What marriage is changing into is a much easier way to get into it and an easier way to get out of it. So I don't think we're ever going to see the end of marriage. We've got the brain circuitry for this. We're going to be forming pair bonds 1 million years from now if we survive as a species. But I think another thing is that I get all these calls constantly, oh, technology is changing love. It can't change love. These brain systems are way below the cortex. And what's really interesting is, for example, Match has Tinder and Chemistry.com and OkCupid and all. Courtship is changing. How you find a partner is changing. But once you walk into the bar or walk into that coffee house or sit down together in the park, the ancient human brain clicks into action and you court the way we did 1,000,000 years ago, with smiling, flirting, listening, giving, etc. It's not going to change. Technology is not changing love. What is changing love is certainly helping a lot of people. I'm going to speed along here, but it's not going to change the human brain. So that brain evolved millions of years ago. There is no way that it is going to change. But I'm optimistic about the future for many, many reasons, but I'll only tell you one. I'm really optimistic because for millions of years, we lived in these little hunting and gathering groups, and women commuted to work to gather their fruits and vegetables. They came home with 60 to 80% of the evening meal. The double income family was the rule. Women were regarded as just as sexual, just as economically capable, and socially astute as men. Then we began to settle down on the farm. You began to have to, women lost their ancient roles as in the economic system, and they became second-class citizens. We are now leaving that. We are leaving that behind. The great 21st century and 20th century movement is not technology. It is the fact that women are piling into the job market in cultures around the world, enabling them to walk out of bad marriages, and men too, in order to make better marriages. And in fact, I thought to myself, well, okay, we got this long pre-commitment stage, and so you're really getting to know somebody before you tie the knot. And women are becoming just as economically powerful as men. So a man's going to think a lot harder about a woman who picks his vegetables on a farm than a woman who's the vice president of Citibank. So I thought to myself, okay, we're in a time now with this long pre-commitment stage and marriages that can end. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe if bad marriages end, we're going to see more good marriages. So I did a study with Match.com of married people, not on Match.com, of course, 1,100 of them. And among the questions that I asked was, would you remarry the person that you are currently married to? And 81% said yes. In many respects, I think we are moving towards, we're certainly in a marriage revolution. Some people say that it's as powerful as the Industrial Revolution, but I think that we are going the right direction. So as I would conclude then, any understanding of the future of human relationships should take into account the most outstanding force among all of us cousins, which is the unquenchable, adaptable, and primordial human drive to love. Thank you.